Just feel that the body is gently landing in this moment, at this place, and that there's a grounding. And that the heart is also expanding and opening to spaciousness, to vastness, to freedom. And placing the right hand on the heart, and then the left hand over the right. And we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. And bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is. And then drawing the face to center, releasing the hands. Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. This morning I'd like to talk about prison. Prison. Yeah, prison. And share with you, again, the story of Mirabai. And some of you heard this in class this morning. Some of you have heard this before. But it's worth repeating because it's such a powerful story. So there was a woman who was born, and she was born into royalty. And at that point in time, many, many hundreds, perhaps 1,000 or 2 years ago, a girl born into royalty meant that she would be married off in order to create political alliance. But when Mirabai was born, and since she was a child, she had an affinity to the divine. And from very young age of a child, she wanted nothing to do with the craziness of the world outside. She just wanted to pray and to write poetry to God. And God, the name that she used, Giridhara Krishna. But the time came for her parents to find an appropriate husband, and an alliance was made between two families. Mirabai was going to marry a prince. She didn't want to. The prince's name is Rana. And Rana promised Mirabai that if she married him, that he would build her a sanctuary where she could pray. He would honor her feelings about the importance of her prayer, even though he was not a Krishna devotee. And that he would allow her that if she would enter into the formal relationship of wife. So she agreed, being torn between family responsibility and God. So some time went on, and Rana became jealous of Mirabai's relationship with God. He would go to the little temple that he built for her, and he would listen at the door and hear her talking and expressing her love, talking about how there could be no other for her, that her heart only belonged to him. And Rana got really jealous. One day he barged in to the temple and he said, "Where is he? Who is it that has soiled your virtue and taken you from me? I'll kill him and imprison you." And there's nobody there except for Mirabai. No human body, So there was a lot of strife at this point in their relationship, but some other things were happening too, and there was some political unrest at that time. And the adversaries came in to try to take over the kingdom. And they killed Rana and his family, and they took Mirabai and imprisoned her. And some say she was so happy. She was so grateful. She didn't see the prison cell as a prison cell. She saw it as yet another moment and another opportunity where she could just dedicate herself to the relationship that her heart longed for with the divine. So she lived out the rest of her life writing the most beautiful poetry, sitting in that jail cell. prison cell, writing. She had a temple adorned with gold and gems and the finest of linens, beautiful myrti. And she had a prison cell with a dirt floor, no privacy, and bars to keep her enclosed. And neither one was any different than the other, because the place where she was free was in her heart and in her love of the divine. Many centuries later, Thich Nhat Hanh is born, an amazing Buddhist teacher. And he starts to travel the world. He became fairly well known during the Vietnam War because he stood in front of a soldier, an American soldier. And he tells the story far more eloquently, but there's a bridge he has to cross to get to the village, and there's no other way around it. And there's an American soldier on the other side of the bridge, and he's a bit fearful because at this point in time, the soldiers don't really trust anybody, North or South Vietnamese, and are having a tendency of just shooting people without talking first. So Thich Nhat Hanh, knowing that he has to go to this village, starts to walk across the bridge with his hands in plain sight, with his head, bowed a little bit, and he approaches the soldier and he starts to talk to him. He says, "I just have to go to the village." Long story short, they had what ended up being a very delightful conversation, but what didn't start that way. Thich Nhat Hanh was permitted to go and do what he needed to do. Years later, he finds himself in the United States, talking at the Maryland State Penitentiary to the guards and the prisoners. And his words to them were, "The prisoners think the guards are free because they get to go home every night. And the guards think that they're imprisoned because they have to show up at this job every day that they may or may not like, mostly may not like." And he said, "But none of you are imprisoned, except in your mind." The prisoner, what we call a prisoner, has freedom in so many moments, and they don't recognize it. And the guard has freedom that is not recognized. And both have imprisonment other than what they think it is, because the imprisonment happens here, not in this path that we walk in life. We look at a relationship and we say, "I feel confined." We look at another relationship and we say, "I feel free." The relationship doesn't make you feel free or confined. You do. You have a temple, you have a prison cell. What dictates your relationship with the divine, whatever name you call that, is how you choose to see your environment. And if you see your environment as a hindrance to you, expressing your love for God, for Goddess, for each other, then that's your experience. But if you see your environment, your ecology as it just is what it is, but you are free. You are free. Your spirit, your soul, your heart, your love is free. It's not confined by four walls or by a war or by a prison, a penitentiary. It's only confined by your intention. Language is very much like that. We see somebody we typically argue with and we say, "Well, I can't talk to them any other way. This is all they understand." It's like, no, don't put yourself in that prison. It's not a prison that's meant for you. You have abilities beyond that. And find the moments where the freedom is experienced. Find the words where the freedom is expressed. Find the spaciousness. So we have these two beautiful examples. We have Mirabai and we have Thich Nhat Hanh and so many others who talk to us and have talked to us in the past and have left us teachings that tell us life is what you make of it. It's a beautiful day out today, wonderful. It's not a beautiful day because the sky is blue and the temperature is moderate. It's a beautiful day because you're choosing to see it that way. That's why it's a beautiful day. If it was raining and thunder and lightning and a little bit of flooding, we can choose to see that as beautiful too. We can choose to see it simply as what is. We don't have to allow that to disturb our heart, to disturb the inner peace. But what if that flood comes and wipes away our belongings? We also don't have to allow that to disturb our inner peace. We can experience and express grief, sadness, anger, and every other emotion with a sense of equanimity. Equanimity isn't being flatline. Equanimity is recognizing, acknowledging, accepting, and continuing on. Equanimity is saying, I feel sorrow. Sorrow is here. Sorrow is with me. I will experience that. I will allow it to be. But I will not allow it to take the reins. Because that's my responsibility. Anger comes to us. You feel the anger. Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful anger-based meditation where, when you start feeling that something is irritating you, you start paying attention to how it's arriving. Where does it meet you first? In the fingertips? Do they start getting tingly? Or in the face? Does your face start getting tight? In your breath, does your breath start getting a little erratic? How does it arrive? How does it meet you? Get to know it as a personality, maybe. Recognize the way that it travels and how it affects you. Welcome it. But don't let it take the reins. Because that's your responsibility, not anger's responsibility. When we let anger take over the reins, then the horses run wild. The horses of the mind and life. But when we allow our true self to maintain the reins, then there is a place for anger to sit and shift and resolve and evolve and involve and remain dormant, whatever it's going to do. And we recognize it's there, but we don't have to interact with it. We don't have to give it the power. We don't have to give it our power. If you're a witness to something, it means that you're not involved. It means that you're not the one who is primarily involved. It means that you're seeing something. You're seeing it and you're recognizing it. You're acknowledging it. And maybe you're even taking in the details of a situation. So when I was in college, it was a big thing. It probably still is in some schools. In the psychology classes, they would typically have the teacher, at the one end of the class, and they'd have this table there, and she'd leave her pocketbook on the table. First of all, nobody realizes that's atypical behavior for this particular individual who only ever walked in with books. But here today, she leaves her pocketbook on the edge of the table, closest to the door. And then she's in the middle of lecture talking about, Freud or Jung or somebody. And this person runs in from the hallway, grabs the bag, and runs back out. And the teacher goes, explicative. And the cops show up. And they start questioning the students. What did you see? He was a college kid. Blue jeans, baggy sweatshirt, with something red written on it. Black hair. Tattoos up and down his arms. Mean. Next person. He had on khaki-colored pants, a blue t-shirt, blonde hair. And when he ran, he looked like he was limping. He really looked kind of scared. Third person says, not sure if it was a guy or a girl, really super tall, had on dark pants and a button-up shirt. I mean, hello. So this was actually a study that was done. And what they found was nobody watches anything accurately. Because then they bring the guy in, and and according to the witnesses, he was anything from Caucasian to Hispanic to black to just whatever, plethora of pictures you could put in your mind for this. And it's like, it was a 5'2" girl with long hair tied back, a baggy sweatshirt, glasses, it was just so not what anyone saw. Okay, so let's just say for a moment playfully that that's the way we experience life. That we don't see anything accurately. But then we come into a spiritual practice and we're asked to discern with more accuracy what it is that we're experiencing and seeing. We're asked to now watch and pay attention to what color the pants are, what kind of shirt it is, if they're wearing glasses, We're asked to notice when anger comes around, when grief comes around, when happiness comes around, and how that affects our physical body, our mental body, our energetic body. And then to experience and witness something really important, and that is that whatever it is that arrives, whatever name you put to it, grief, anger, love, passion, whatever, it never affects you. It never touches you. Because you're not this body, and you're not this mind. The truth of you is what is behind that, watching. When we're the witness who gets it all incorrect and inaccurate, that's the ego watching. That's the ego wanting to be included, part of the drama, making up stories. I saw everything. But when we come into a spiritual practice, the witness is not the ego. The witness is spirit. The witness is the true self. It is the part of the self that is unaffected, undisturbed, and undistracted by everything that happens in the world. And through empowering that aspect of ourself, which is the spirit, we find that we are free everywhere and anywhere, whether you are in a temple or a prison, whether you are in a relationship or out of a relationship, whether you are in a healthy body or an unhealthy body, whether you are lost on Route 66, traveling through the Midwest, or you're on, 422 in Reading. No matter where your physical body is, you're free. That's not an easy thing, though. It's not an easy thing to understand. It's not an easy thing to practice. It's not even an easy thing to believe. It's like, no way, these people, how can I be free? I have to pay taxes. I have to go get this job that I can't stand and work 50 hours a week, don't like it. That's not freedom. What do you mean that's free? I can't be free there. And it's like, you can be free there. You can. It comes down to your choice. It comes down to what it is that you're focusing on. I had a student many years ago who worked in a hospital. Some of you have heard this. It's worth repeating, though. And he came to me one day and he said, I'm at such a loss anymore. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I work this job. I work like 50 hours a week, sometimes 60. It has absolutely no meaning whatsoever. And I really am at a point now, and he was probably around 50, maybe a little bit older. He said, I'm at a point in my life now where I just feel like I need to do something that has meaning to it. And here I am in this office a lot of the time by myself, just signing off. Doesn't matter to anybody. He was so sad. He was so hopeless. He was so, he was like, my life has no meaning. And I was, so what do you do exactly? And he said, well, I sit in an office and I sign my name off on papers. I said, what papers? He said, oh, well, okay. So the doctors, they go in and they see the patients and they decide what's wrong with the patients after they do all the tests, and then they prescribe medication for the patients, or they prescribe, or they suggest a surgery or a treatment form of some point or another. He said, and what happens next is that paperwork comes to me, and I have to look at what the doctor has written down on the paper, what's written down on the prescription pad, and what has been provided by the pharmacy within the hospital, and make sure that there are no mistakes. I said, you don't see meaning in that. And he said, I'm just signing my name. I said, you're saving lives. And he just looked at me with the most blank look on his face. He said, what? I said, you're literally saving lives. How long have you been in this job? He said, I've been here 24 years. I said, how many lives do you think you've saved in 24 years? How many? He goes, I don't think I've saved any. I said, how many mistakes have you found? He went, oh my God, you do not want to know. I said, well, that's how many lives you've saved. And he was so taken aback by that. He didn't even think of it. It didn't even dawn on him. I said to him, if it's the loneliness of the job that you think might be hindering your ability to witness the good work that you're doing, then maybe take routine breaks during the day to connect with people. Get up every hour for 5 minutes and go for a walk and say hello to people. But don't allow your ego or your loneliness to dictate. Don't allow that. Don't give the reins to that. No. The work you're doing is so very important. Thank goodness there's someone mindful doing that. Otherwise, you don't know what would happen. So many mistakes made. So even in a job that you dislike. And then if you're in a job where, sometimes there are abusive situations in jobs, right? Sometimes we take a lot of abuse from, the boss. The freedom that can be found in that type of a position is your choice to stay or to leave. That you have free will. And also your choice to take the reins back from fear. In thinking that, well, I have to stay in this job. It's the only way I can pay my rent. It's the only way I can pay my bills. You really don't. Life will change. Your next job may be worse or better or the same. But you do have the free will to make the choice that sits within your best interest. Always. Now, what is best interest? Best interest is not that which pays the rent. Best interest is that which empowers the inner witness to see life accurately and then to respond instead of react. And then through that process of seeing life more accurately, learning how to respond instead of react, we empower ourselves to come into a deeper appreciation, a deeper gratitude for what we actually have, for the relationships that we hold, for the laughter we share, for the tears we cry, for all of it. And then that opens us up to an even deeper devotion to whatever it is that you have faith in. Does that make sense? So you're clearing yourself out of the unnecessary in order to empower the necessary, in order to empower the deeper connection. Some people might suggest that talking, like that and talking about free will, that when you're talking to somebody who's going through a rough time, that's like victim blaming. No, it's not. Nope, not in any way, shape, or form. Not victim blaming. It is empowering a person to move beyond the definition that they have been given of victim. And allowing a person to see that even if I had this relationship that was abusive and horrible and harmful, in this moment I can be okay. I can be okay. I can take the reins back in this moment. I can give myself the opportunity to see myself as a whole, meaningful person and give myself an opportunity to heal. I can do that. Whether I stay in that relationship or I go from that relationship, I can do that. And if you would like some proof of that, well, we all live in the same violent world, do we not? Every one of us live in the same violent world. And living in this violent world is like being in an abusive relationship. And yet somehow we find our way in certain moments to see the beauty, to experience the laughter and the love, to feel the calmness. Somehow we still find our way, even though life within this world itself fits within the confines of an abusive relationship. Each person has their own particular abilities and lack thereof. But that's just because each one of us has different work to do in this life. We have different circumstances to empower that work if we choose to. And there's the freedom, if we choose to. And if we don't, it's okay, because something else will come along and we'll have a chance to work there. Happens all the time. All the time. Just become a really good witness. Become the kind of witness that sees very clearly what is happening, that accepts whatever part of what is happening might be one's responsibility. And then don't jump into areas where you are not able to respond. So the word responsibility is not blame. Our culture is Our culture is not very good at looking at the definition of words. We take a word and we say, I don't like that word. It means this. And oftentimes when we say to somebody, accept responsibility, what they think you're saying to them is, you're at fault for this. Pick up the slack. That's not what the word responsibility means. The word responsibility is a beautiful word. It actually means that you are cultivating the ability to respond. That's all it means. Rather than react. You are cultivating the ability to respond rather than react. Isn't that what we want? So don't water down the word responsibility into some kind of a blame game. That is not what it is. Do you want to walk through life weak and unempowered? Then water it down. You want to go through life, even in the most challenging and difficult of moments, as a powerful human being? Then accept responsibility. Cultivate the ability to respond rather than react, so that you can see clearly what's happening and then adapt, adjust, and accommodate as necessary to empower yourself and others to experience inner peace and love and compassion. So important. Mirabai and Thich Nhat Hanh, beautiful examples of this. Mirabai accepted the responsibility because she saw no difference whatsoever between the temple and the prison. None. Thich Nhat Hanh accepted responsibility beautifully because he saw no difference between his own suffering and the suffering of that American soldier waiting on the other side of the bridge. He said the suffering is the same. The healing will also be the same. The details might be a little bit different, but yeah, whatever. The rest of it is the same. So now think of a place in your life where you think you're either in a temple or a prison. And practice seeing no difference between the two. Have equanimity. And instead of preferring one over the other, just love. Instead of saying to ourselves, well, if I could just have this, if I could get rid of that, if I could get rid of that, if I could get this, life would somehow be different. When my paycheck comes on Friday, life will be good. When I buy the car I want, I'll be happy. When I get the relationship I want, I'll be satisfied. Life will be so yummy. Really? The car will break down. The relationship will inevitably end up with some significant flaw. And we'll just become either satisfied or satisfied and dissatisfied, and begin to look for something else in another area of our life or the same area of our life. Because that's what the ego does. It just keeps looking. And it's not witnessing anything. It's just collecting. Gimme, 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 gimme. Don't give me that. Don't give me that. Give me that. Give me that. Don't give me that. But the Spirit witnesses. The Spirit says, love is here in this moment. Compassion is here in this moment. Life is happening in this moment. How are you living it? Thoughts, reflections, questions. Tomas?
So what came up for me while you were sharing was this understanding of and giving up a preference. There's this availability to listen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And what do you hear when you listen?
This morning is beautiful. But it's that listening that creates the ability to equanimity, because we're not responsible for the listening, but we're not responsible for what we hear. We think we are, but if you listen beyond your voice and you actually listen to people's hearts, then there's this effortlessness that comes with that equanimity that is all perfect. With the American soldier, I don't know, I wasn't there, but I can sense that he was just listening to his heart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because words have meaning, and sometimes the meaning is construed incorrectly, right? It's like when someone says hello, another person says hello, same tone, same inflection. One person, you're like all happy, hi. The other person, you're like, what do they mean by that? When you say these words and we're constantly lost in language, trying to discern and decipher meaning. And typically trying to discern and decipher meaning so that I feel comfortable. Not worried about discerning and deciphering meaning so that you feel comfortable. When we're driven by the ego and we're caught up in the external, we're constantly looking for comfort for the self, for me. Not the capital S self, but the little s self. Satisfaction. But when we stop to listen, we become concerned with the comfort of the other more than ourselves. That's what we're here for. If we're really listening to each other, we're here holding space for each other and not being self-centered or selfish. I don't like what you do because it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. Yes, it's important to have an understanding of what I feel I need, but it is equally important to not use that as a tool or as a weapon to harm someone else by denying what they need, by denying the very existence of what they need. And many times that's what we do. Yeah, but many times that's what we do. We use language as a way to assault others, trying to get what we want. And I love musicians, you know. You speak to a musician who's really in touch with their music, and they'll say, I don't write songs. They're already written. I just hear them. I just hear them. When we first came here, and even still till today, and I assume forever, but when we first came here, it was very prominent. I would walk up and down the halls just quietly and listen. And I heard so many things. I heard laughter. I heard chanting. I heard a symphony. I heard all kinds of musical instruments. I heard children. I heard voices. Not like psychologically or anything, you know, just in the hallways. All this energy is still moving back and forth, but it was all so happy. And there were one or two who were troubled. There were one or two who hid down like the end of that hall and would, you know, the sound that was coming from that area would be a little sad or lonely, you know. But it's okay. It's there too. But if you listen, you can hear things that you cannot even begin to imagine. They say in yoga that there's a level of skill or mastery that a person acquires in meditation, and they start to hear things. They start to hear bells. They start to hear frequencies. They start to hear, closest I can come to explaining it is chimes or violin-like music. Medical doctors would call that, what do they call that? Tinnitus. Yeah. And there is a thing called tinnitus. There's a diagnosis. It's valid. But I had a friend of mine who was a very adamant meditator. And she messaged me one time and she was like, oh man, I'm having this thing. I just got diagnosed with tinnitus, and I really, you know, I'm just so concerned. Like, my mind is wrought over this diagnosis, and I'm having so much trouble sitting in meditation. I don't get it because I love meditation. And this person really loves meditation, and it's her practice. And you know, she's expressing herself. And at the end of it, when I messaged back to her, I said, have you stopped for a moment to consider that it's not tinnitus? That's what the doctor said. The doctor said it was tinnitus. They said they did it. I said, have you stopped for a moment to consider that it's not tinnitus? But the doctor said, what else would it be, Sudha? I mean, come on. I said, have you stopped for a moment to consider that it's not tinnitus? Oh. Thank you. Talked to her about 3 months later. No, everything's great. No worries. Not a problem at all. There are things we do not understand. And just because we don't understand them doesn't make them bad things. As a matter of fact, maybe they're actually gifts. But Tomas is 100% correct. We have to stop and listen. And then we need to witness. And then discern. Or surrender. Any other questions or reflections right now? Yes?
During your whole thing, I had a song playing in my head. I was hearing a song. And it's just completely aligning with what you're saying. And it's a song we sing as a protest song. It's one I learned recently from a movement that I've recently got involved with, who they're really focusing on the hard work that they're doing to pressure representatives to actually represent us can be joyful and fun too.
Yeah.
And it starts with, in desperation, we found freedom. And in freedom, we found love.
Wow.
And in love, we found devotion. And in devotion, spirit found us.
There you go. Isn't that a beautiful activism? Yeah. I love those kind of activisms. I call them activations. Traditionally in our nation and around the world, but definitely here in this country, activism is a bit violent. It's all about you being wrong. It's all about you doing something bad. It really is all about blame. And I in my younger life, I was definitely a protest activist, and I had no problem, telling people how they were wrong. Until one day, I was in a train station with my son, and he was probably about 4, maybe. I guess about 5. He was my granddaughter's age. And we were standing in line, and the woman in front of us had on this fur coat. And it was obviously a very expensive coat. She had on, the patent leather heels and everything to go with it, and she was a very well-to-do individual. And my son, who learned from me. And the woman turned around and to see who was tugging on the arm of her coat. And he looked at her, and her face initially was like, "Oh, hi." And he went, "Do you know how many animals died to make that coat you're wearing?" And her face, and mine, was, and I thought to myself, what am I teaching him? What am I teaching him? She got all angry and pissed. A couple of explicatives, walked away. Yeah. Control your kid. Yeah. So the mom in me is like, my kid can control himself. But the humanist in me was like, what have I taught him? So I began to re-educate myself and re-educate him. And that, what you just shared with us, became the point of the matter. Yeah. Anyone can be an angry protester. It takes a certain kind of dedication and understanding to be a loving and compassionate protester. So kudos to you. Yeah.
Would it be possible to understand freedom without having the confinement of some sort? I've been thinking about how every imprisonment in a way would be an opportunity to rediscover freedom and perhaps even make it more vast or broad or meaningful.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about breath. Breath in. If we really are not just the body, breath in. And this is coming up as we're sitting here. Breath in a way, it's an imprisonment of, well, whatever we are, maybe even that volume of air. And breath out is it freedom.
Agreed, yeah, and that's a great question. And this is my opinion on it, but this is also some of what I've also read, is to say that there are different temperaments of people. So on the human level of this is to say that there are people who need the containment in order to experience the freedom. There are people who spiritually, humanistically, will experience freedom out of relief from the imprisonment. There are people who, when they experience imprisonment, they think that's all there is and they become lost there, and they feel that freedom is not possible. There are people who believe they have attained freedom, but they haven't, and they feel that they can be never contained within a prison, and they fight very vehemently against anything that tries to hold them. So in our human experience, and we all experience all three of those, we will typically have a tendency to take it too far one way or another, and not under the best of circumstances. Spiritually speaking, the more that you dedicate yourself to your devotion, Patanjali says this very clearly in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. He says that a practice committed over a long period of time, with little to no interruption, great devotion, managed skillfully to be the focus of life, will lead to a paravaragya, to a supreme practice, where the practitioner knows freedom in every moment. But to know freedom truly in every moment means that you need to have some kind of a skill-building practice, spiritual practice, in place over a long period of time with little to no interruption and great devotion, constantly working to release or evolve the ego and embrace the heart of the matter. And then in that situation, yes, I think it's entirely possible for someone to experience freedom without experiencing this other form of confinement, which is largely defined by the ego. Does that make sense? And then the third part is that some people say that this experience of confinement, freedom is inherent in our humanity because that's what's happening with God. That God is so perfect, so absolutely perfect, so 100% completely perfect, that the only way for it to experience its own perfection is by becoming imperfect on purpose in order to rediscover its perfection, which makes it a play, a dance, or a lila. Yeah.
Could devotion be in some way compared to allowing flow then, with the rediscovery? And it's almost as if everything is meant to be in constant movement then, and this is where it all unites, even though it's all on its own.
Yeah, they did an interesting study a few years back about car accidents. And they said the person driving the car who looks in the rearview mirror has come to a stop and sees that the car behind him is not stopping, prepares for the hit. Person B, driving along, stops, doesn't see the car coming behind them, does not prepare for the impact. In both situations, the car was out of the control of the individual. The response versus reaction was in their control if they even knew what was going to happen. The people who braced for the impact most oftentimes experienced far worse injuries than the person who just went with the flow. Isn't that amazing? So you can look at all parts of life and say to yourself, well, I know I'm going to run into so-and-so today, and so I'm just going to get myself ready. Yeah. How many of you have done that? Everybody's hand should be up. So I'm going to get myself ready. Now, by ready, I don't mean like you've dotted your I's, crossed your T's, and, like if it's a legal thing or whatever. I'm talking about, the ego. Yeah. And then one of two things, three, maybe three. One of three things happens. You go there in all your readiness. That was my Jersey girl coming out of me. You go there with all your readiness. And a war ensues. I wonder how much of that war your readiness caused. You go there in all your readiness, and the other person meets you with something you were not expecting, like kindness. And suddenly, you are taken so off guard that you are both humiliated and now fighting even more vehemently to prove what a jackass this person is, because they are not going to be kinder than you. Yeah? It's true, though. I'm so happy that it makes you happy. I totally. It's all about the laughter yoga. The third thing that happens is that even though you have prepared thyself for this encounter, on your way, you change your mind. Somewhere along the way, you say, maybe I don't need all this armor. Maybe I can put some of this heavy freaking armor down. Maybe I can just hold space, see what happens, and respond in the moment. And that outcome is so much different than the other two. That outcome is allowing the reveal, the conceal, reveal, conceal, reveal, conceal, and you're present to it. The other two are trying to control and manipulate, control and manipulate, control and manipulate. Controlling and manipulating is not being with the flow. There are, of course, times where we need to have some idea of control. There are, of course, times where there's gentle manipulation, but that's not a negative kind of manipulation. It's where I'm mindfully choosing my words so that they have the greatest clarity. Someone the other day called me a wordsmith. I wasn't sure how to take that. I sat with it before I responded. And then when I responded, I said, thank you. Thank you for recognizing that I really do spend time trying to allow languaging that comes from me to have clarity. Yeah. But what he meant was that I'm a poet. Because he's a poet. And so he was talking to me. He was like, oh, I didn't mean that, Sudha. I just meant I really like your poetry. I was like, oh, okay. So, yeah. Great reflection. Any others? Questions, reflections?
I was just going to say, it basically is it speaks to the duality of life.
Totally.
This whole, conceal, what you were saying, conceal, reveal, and whether we need confinement to feel freedom. I mean, it really just speaks to our existence, which is of that kind of dual nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be kind of fun if you let it be.
See that, yeah.
Yeah. Certainly the bee sting is going to hurt. But that doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. Right? It's an experience, and then you let the experience go, and then you have another experience. And that's just what's going to happen because you're alive, and there's no getting away from it. But then there's this other part of ourself, which is the heart, which is, in my opinion, I follow the school of thought of non-duality. That there's this other part of ourself that is just so intimately married into oneness. and that our service and our acknowledgement of oneness and our compassion, it doesn't mean we're never going to harm, but it means that we will be far less likely to do it on purpose with something like anger as our guide. So the duality is natural to us, and the non-duality is also natural to us. Yeah? But those two things are opposed to each other. So much fun. Any other reflections or thoughts? We're good? A lot to think about today. A lot to think about. So let's sit up tall, close the eyes, and don't think too much. Take a nice breath in, a nice breath out. And just be silent and listen. And go beyond the sound of my voice or the sound of anything in this room. Go beyond. Go into the ethers, the core of your being, and just listen. Placing the right hand on the heart, and the left hand over the right. And together we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. May we all become skillful and masterful of the love within our hearts, the intelligence within our minds, and in maintaining the connection between self and self, self and the divine, and self and all that is. Thank you all so much for being here today. Namaste. So wonderful to gather with each and every one of you. Good. So now they're serving lunch, brunchy lunch, until 1. And at 12:30 we'll do the gong bath in here. And so the way that Michelle's mat is set up over there. Michelle, is it still set? Oh, okay. So, yeah, so your head should just face the gongs, yeah, if you're going to be staying for that. And that'll be at 12:30. So I will see some of you then, and others of you I will see the week after next. So just as a reminder, next week I'm going to be taking part in a service of remembrance at Albright College. And so I won't be teaching next Sunday morning because I'll be there. I don't like to change my Sunday mornings. They're very important to me, and I feel to community as well. But there's twice for the rest of this year that I know of. One is next Sunday. I'm going to try to have Dayananda cover the yin in the Wisdom Circle if he's able to. And the second one is November 2nd, I think it is. November 3rd, yeah, November 3rd. Mm-hmm. 4th, 5th, 6th. No, it's the 3rd, you're right. November 3rd. I've already shared with some of you that I'm going to India to release Ed's remains into the Ganges River, which is a very important thing in our tradition. And so I'll be there with my guru. Michelle will be traveling with me. My daughter might be traveling with me as well. And we'll be gone for 10 days. So that Sunday, if Dayananda is available, then he'll be teaching as a guest instructor. Otherwise, the classes won't be held. So I thank you for allowing that interruption compassionately. And I hope that it doesn't jar your week too much. If the classes have to be canceled for those 2 weeks, for those 2 weekends, then I would suggest go back and listen to one of the Wisdom Circles from a previous talk. There's 90 of them up there, at least, on our YouTube channel. So you can always go back and listen to a topic that is tugging at your heart. Wonderful. Thank you all. Enjoy.